This is the English Suite podcast, the voice of Widener University English and Creative Writing. I'm Gabby Norris. In today's episode, Jim Esch chats with recent graduate Emma Irving about her post-grad career in the publishing world and her participation in the Widener writers community. Emma also shares her first ever creative publications, which appear in Millennial Pulp Literary Magazine.
This is Emma Irving, a Widener alum. Emma, you were class of 2018, is that correct? Yeah. You were English major, and but you're also now doing creative writing and all kinds of cool stuff.
Yeah.
One thing we can talk about is the Widener Writers Workshop. Is that something that you're helping to coordinate on Facebook? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So I'm part of the loosely named planning group for these workshops that we've been having, along with Victoria, Autumn, Emily, Kelsey, and Dr. C. Of course, we've been. It was at the beginning of the pandemic when Dr. C first started engaging the Widener Writers Group to do some more stuff, to share our work and little 100-word stories, which really kicked off some just a really creative spark in me and a lot of other people. So we were excited to do some Zoom workshops. I don't even remember when our first one was. October, November, maybe. But we've just tried all sorts of different fun things, from our holiday one and Christmas, where we, had a wheel of different holiday prompts. That was a blast, to the last workshop where we asked participants to bring work in advance to share, and then do small breakout rooms. And it's been a really fantastic process, especially for me. So I was an English major, like you said, but didn't take any creative writing classes. But also I just had no confidence in my creative writing. And I was so intimidated by all of you, my professors, by the people in my program, by my peers. I was really I felt in competition with people when I first arrived at college, which I feel like can be a carryover from high achieving high schoolers who come to college, and it's another sort of thing you got to rise to the top of, when the best thing that we have in the English department is our community. So it's been really fulfilling and healing for me to bring my work, my stuff that I love, the stuff that I think is shitty and I'm still very much working on, to these people that are, I'm not in competition with. You are all my friends. And I trust your judgment, and I love hearing what everybody else is working on. So I would highly suggest anybody in the English department, alumni, current students, professors who's listening to this, come to one of our workshops. You will just love it. Be bouncing off the walls, like I always am. But
that's great. I wholeheartedly agree. And I didn't go to the first workshop, but I went to the last two, and they were so much fun. And I plan to keep going to them.
Yeah.
I want to probe a little deeper into something you said, because you were saying at some point you must have gotten more comfortable. You felt a little bit maybe intimidated or in competition, but then at what point in your college career, or did it happen after college, where you felt a little bit more willing to get involved with creative writing and start sharing work and becoming part of that?
Yeah. So I lost the kind of sense of general competition pretty early. And definitely by the time that I went to England with a certain group of English majors, with Victoria, Kim, Taylor, we all became much closer at that point. But in terms of my creative writing, I haven't even really, I've been journaling my whole life, and, during school, of course, but sharing, I feel like it really kicked off when I went to AWP, and I started interacting with writers, with living people who were writing. And it's this thing that I understood, even though I'm reading all these old dead writers, there are people who are alive, who are working, who are creating things. But until I was actually in a conference hall with these sorts of people, I was wow, they, they're writers, but they're also eating a chicken sandwich over there. They're writers, but they're also people. And it kind of broke down this wall for me that I had built up in my mind, which was, we only share the things that are published. Our published works are the things that we can bring to the world. Everything else is a draft. It's bad. It's something you keep hidden until it's perfect. But that's really false. And I think the best thing about writing is that you get to be a writer, from the first word that you write down on the page until it's published. If it's never published, you're still a writer. It's been a really interesting journey for me. I don't know if I can pinpoint really when I got more comfortable with sharing my work. I feel like maybe only in the last year when, like we said, we've been doing all this Zoom stuff and I'm, at my house, I'm more comfortable kind of here than in maybe an auditorium or a workshop setting where I have to read out loud. And then just continuing to stay in touch with my professors and my friends in the department. And I'm just always so curious as to what, my friends are working on, because I have, so many wonderful people in my community who are working on so many great things right now. And I've had to accept that I can also be a great person in my community working on great stuff too. So
right.
That's kind of been that journey.
Yeah, that's interesting. There's so much I want to get into with that. One has to do with AWP. Mm-hmm. You went, was your first AWP Tampa? Was that?
No, the first one I went to was in DC in 2017.
Oh, I didn't go to that one. I didn't
the inauguration, which was an amazing experience. That was a really kind of big defining moment for me in terms of establishing myself in my greater literary community.
Because I had never been to an AWP till pretty late in my career.
Yeah.
And it was my first was in Boston. And I forget the year. It was maybe about 10 years ago. And I was, there's a little backstory here. When I was in grad school, I actually think I was at one of the first AWPs.
Yeah.
It was a very small conference. I went to grad school in Texas at University of Texas, Austin.
Oh, I didn't know.
And through the creative writing program that I was involved in, we got in for free. And but it was a very small conference. It was, I don't know, everyone fit in one banquet hall.
That's insane.
Yeah. So I don't even really count that. I didn't even know what it was at the time. But my first real AWP was Boston. And I was just I don't know if you had this experience too, but I think you might have. I was overwhelmed. You're walking through this gigantic convention center with, I don't know, 12,000 other writers.
Yeah.
And it's like you feel almost like you're home or something, like there's these people who are interested in the same things that you're interested in, but we're all spread out across the country.
Yeah.
But then they all come together in this one place, and it's just it was very special, and I was almost overwhelmed by it, that first conference.
Absolutely. I remember, Dr. C kind of preparing us for this. He was like, you'll be overwhelmed. There'll be thousands and thousands of people there. But walking into that hall for the first time was, truly undescribable. But yeah, it's we have, all these different people all doing vastly different things across the country, across the world. And then you come together and you see wow, there are so many different ways to be doing this sort of thing. And we all call ourselves writers and we all call it writing and creating. It's overwhelming in the best way. In the best way.
Right. And you're rubbing shoulders with some very famous writers, and it's so cool. They're just normal people too. Right. And, from literary celebrity, that was kind of my first time that I was really kind of starstruck by literary figures. I'd gone to readings and some book signings before, but to be we went to a reading with Ta-Nehisi Coates and Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie one of the first nights, and I had known a bit about Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie's work because part of her TED Talk is featured in a Beyonce song, which I had always loved. And so then I got to see her, and I remember the shoes she was wearing. I was like, wow, look at this woman who's, she's such a cultural icon to me, and she's here and I'm listening to her in conversation with Ta-Nehisi Coates. It was just beyond my wildest dreams. And then just kept going back, not this year, but I went in, 2017, 18, 19,
20. Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's such a good, it's like a good kind of ritual, sort of traveling to the Mecca sort of thing. And Victoria and I have taken up, we always go on a trip. We went to the Portland AWP after we graduated, and then last year in San Antonio. We actually just booked a trip for ourselves, like a little writing retreat at the end of April, because we're always so used to like going somewhere during this time. So we just got a little Airbnb in Tennessee, and we're going to go write. And
nice. Are you going to be in the mountains? Yeah. In the mountains in Tennessee, or
yeah, kind of like a little bit north of Gatlinburg, like Smoky Mountains.
Smokies are cool.
Yeah. Excited.
I hope you get a lot of writing done. That sounds awesome.
Yeah, thanks.
The other thing you mentioned, I think this is a problem maybe English majors face, or lit majors. I know I dealt with this a little bit as an undergraduate. Like when you're studying literature, you're reading what is essentially finished published work, and it's anthologized and it's very famous for good reasons. This is beautiful work and stood the test of time and everything. And you're then comparing that to your own lowly writing that might be coming out of a journal. Right. And you're like, okay, I'll never get there. Right. But you don't realize that these writers were also writing in journals and doing rough drafts and had editors that helped them shepherd their work along. Yeah. And it takes a while to sort of realize that they're not so different from you.
Yeah, there's a bunch of quotes that are coming to mind as I think about this. Like, overnight successes have been how many years in the making? There's some quote that like the best writers have written more bad work than all the bad writers combined. You have to you got to work up there. People don't just, you don't come out of the womb knowing the language and knowing how to put it together. It's part of this process. And it also gets to the formation of the literary canon in general, which was something that I hadn't really considered until I got to Widener. And, the standard that we hold our literature to, at least in this country, and sort of, how the academia, I think, in our country defines it, has been, it's very Eurocentric. It's a very male, white dominated sort of paradigm. And then you think about how many people, don't write like that, but write in a way that's still absolutely valid and beautiful, and how many people have been written and never published and their journals were, destroyed. There's so much more than, the published books on our, on our shelves and on our syllabi, and kind of thinking about that helped me feel more a part of the community as a whole.
Yeah. I think that's a great point, because if you don't see yourself in that anthology, like you don't see yourself represented. Yeah. Like how many women are in these anthologies, or how many African Americans, or people of color, or different sexualities, whatnot. You're going to start to feel excluded, and you might feel like you don't belong in that club, or what have you. But even though I'm a white male, like I've got a sense of that too, I think, in terms of social class. So I'll give you an example of this. Like when this happened, I think when I was an undergrad, or maybe right after, I saved all my old anthologies. I don't know if you still have yours, but all my old Nortons and all that. So I started going through, and I would read the little biographical notes for each author that we had read. And I started to notice, I was looking at like their educational backgrounds, and so many of them went to elite universities. Like if it was an American lit anthology, like they were going to places like Harvard or Yale, Ivy League schools. Yeah. And I don't see anyone from Westchester University here. Right. Yeah. Or, the community college or what have you. Like it's, those people that weren't making it into the anthologies. And I thought, so this is like a little elite little club that many of us don't really have access to.
Yeah. It just represents one sort of possible, I don't even know what I would say, just one possible, way that we can think of literature as good, or, publishable, or any sort of thing like that. But that's And I've struggled with this as I've started working in publishing as well.
And what do you do in publishing? Why don't you tell us?
Yeah, so I do many things for many different people. I've sort of been freelancing since I graduated. The first thing that I did after I graduated, I got an internship that I had found when I was at an AWP in Tampa with Green Writers Press. So I began as an intern, just doing all the normal intern sort of tedious work that we do. And then I continued on after my internship ended and started getting paid to do some editorial work, to do some different marketing projects for authors. So I've worked in royalties. I've gone to our distributor independent publishers group had a summit that I went to. So I've been I wanted to dabble in a bunch of different sort of areas of publishing to figure out what I wanted to do the most. So I've done a lot of work with Green Writers. And then through them, I got introduced to a writing retreat and competition based in Vermont, which is where Green Writers is based as well, called When Words Count. So I have been doing some work for them, which involves, so it's a beautiful mountaintop resort in Vermont where writers can just come to write, but there's also a book deal competition. So I've been helping out there as well, getting authors prepared to present their manuscript, cover design, cover copy, marketing plan. It's like this holistic sort of competition there. So I work a lot with authors at all sorts of stages of the publication process, from very creation of a story through, let's get it through proofreading, through copy editing, let's make a digital arc, and then getting it out, marketing plans, and working on all that stuff. So I kind of run the gamut, I would say. And that's what I wanted to do, because even, as a senior in college, I was like, what is publishing? There's so many different mediums and ways to be published and different kinds of outlets, big and small and independent and the big five. And I was like, I don't know. I don't really know where I want to be in this. So I just wanted to try sort of everything. But I think I was going to talk about how I've struggled with publishing because of how much of a business it is. And as someone who, went to an English major and just loves writing and creating for the sake of making art in the world, the business of it is a struggle for me. The fact that the business is made up of pretty much only people like me, white women, make up a astounding majority of professionals in the publishing community. And, we don't represent all of the art that's being created by a long shot. So I feel very often that burden. But I really believe in publishing at the community level. I believe that seeing your work in a book being held by somebody else has so much power. And I'm really trying to focus my publishing efforts now. I don't want to work for a big five publisher. I think it's a fantastic route and gets, a lot of authors the recognition they deserve. And, now there are more, there's more diversity in the big five, which is great. But I really think that where I want to go with my efforts is to the community level. I think that's where a lot of great work gets done. And, art has the most power, I think, when it's centralized in the community. I don't even remember what the question was, but that was that's an answer to some question that might have been asked or maybe not.
So are you, where are you going to take this? I mean, who knows the future, but are you contemplating taking steps towards a further career in publishing, like maybe working for a press or starting a press or getting involved with some community organizations that would be publishing? Where do you see this going?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's always been in my mind to start a press. That's kind of been one thing that I've always sort of dreamt of. To a lesser extent, being a published author, I feel like I write for me, and whether or not I ever share it with anybody else, like the creation of it, I just enjoy that. But I think I can definitely see myself starting and running a press, and involving a lot of people that I've worked with at Widener in this capacity. We're also, within our planning group for the workshops, talking about starting a literary magazine, cool. And doing some more readings or workshops that kind of involve the community more. I know Jane Thompson does a lot of work at the intersection of, publishing and art and writing, and then civic engagement, community uplifting, that sort of thing. So yeah, I'm really contemplating what's kind of next, because I don't want to work for a big five. I don't really see myself getting a graduate degree in publishing, but I do see myself trying to connect more with community organizations, working, writing workshops, and how do we get more people, especially young people, people of color, people across the gender and sexuality spectrum, get their words, published, because that is, I think, the best thing you can do for a person. So there's some things in the works, at least in my mind.
That's amazing. I think you're going to be a great success at it. Honestly, this is really wonderful to hear. Yeah. So when you have news to report, tell us first. We'll
absolutely.
Break it across the podcast.
I will stop by the English suite.
I want to talk a little bit about your own creative writing too, because you have some very happy news to report that I saw come across your Instagram. I guess it was. I want to talk about that.
So I have been published for the first time.
Hooray!
In my life. Thank you. It's very exciting. So I heard about this journal. I'm in their inaugural issue of Millennial Pulp. A woman that I worked with at Green Writers Press is on the staff there. So I'd seen her posting about their inaugural issue, and they were trying to gather up some submissions. So I just submitted just out of kind of support for her, and forgot about it, but heard back about, we're getting up to like a year ago now that I heard back that I was accepted. So I've just kind of been waiting, and I'm still waiting on my contributor copy very anxiously to kind of hold it in my hands. But
I saw pictures of it. I saw pictures of it. It's in print for real.
Yes, it is. And I mentioned this to you, but serendipitously, the Millennial Pulp Instagram featured my pieces at 8:00 last Wednesday night, which was exactly when our workshop started. So it was really, it was funny to look down and see this notification on my phone, where they were, kind of plugging my pieces. And I was also engaging with everybody in the writers group. And it felt like, wow, like I'm a writer. And that's not something I've always been able to say, even though it's always been true.
Right. When you say you're a writer, I always think of this quote that's in this creative writing book that I've used from time to time with my intro classes. And I forget the official title of the book, but it's written by a woman, Pat Schneider is the author. Its book has great prompts in it, by the way. And she says very early in that intro to that book, a writer is someone who writes. It's as simple as that. Like, so she makes that distinction between writing and publishing, or a writer and an author or whatever. Like, you don't have to ever publish this officially. If you write, you're creating, you're putting something in, on the page, you're a writer.
Absolutely. And that's like such a revelatory statement, even though it seems so simple, but I feel like we all have our own journeys to get there. And I just saw a Toni Morrison quote today. It's her birthday. But I saw a quote by her this morning that was like, you are not your work, you are the person you are. And it's interesting because writing, I feel like, or I've started to refer to the stuff that I do for other people and get paid for as like my projects, but my writing is my work. So I think, kind of defining that in this age, in this capitalistic society where, we're making money to buy a house, to, get married and have our 2.5 kids or whatever. Like it's
don't forget the picket fence.
The white fence, right. And the golden retriever. It's important, I think, for writers and people in our community to really just to know that, and to go through the whole horrible process of coming to know that you're a writer and being able to freely kind of use that term. Because the first 2 AWPs I went to, I would go around to the tables and people would ask, are you a writer? What do you write? And I would say no. I said no. And I could have, at the end of, I think the Tampa one, I started to lie. I'd be like, yeah. And then I'm like writing a science fiction thing about I just make shit up just to kind of gain that confidence, being like, yeah, I'm working on something. Like, what can you do for me? Which was
Yeah, at that very early AWP I was telling you about in Texas, I had a very good creative writing professor, Jim Magnuson. I think he's the director of their MFA program down there still. But he was introducing me to these people, one of whom was this woman, Joyce Johnson, who at the time, she was an author. She was one of Jack Kerouac's girlfriends.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But she, by that point in her career, was working in publishing, and I think she might have been an agent by that point. So I was just this naive, dorky grad student, and again, with not a lot of confidence or anything, and maybe wouldn't even call myself a writer, like you were saying. But she was like chatting me up, and she was at the time I was working on my creative thesis, which was a novella, and she started asking me to talk about it. So I was sort of summarizing it. And she said something like to the effect of like, oh, okay, cool. Like, why don't you send that to me or something like that.
Yeah.
Of course, I never sent it. I was like, oh, it's not good enough. I'm not going to do that. Right. I'm not ready.
Yeah.
Why? Like, why was I such a dope?
Yep. Oh, it's hard. You look back and you're like, why didn't I just do it? Why didn't I just try? But it takes that time to like feel confidence in it. But I really feel like once you come to that place where you can be like, I am a writer, then these things, like these little things will start to pop up and kind of confirm it for you. Or at least it's been that way with me. Just even like the confluence of the posting of the Millennial Pulp thing with the writers workshop. It was like, wow, these two little things are happening at once. Like that. It seems like a good sign.
Well, speaking of these two pieces, you had two pieces published, right?
Yeah.
Do you want to read them to us? And
yes, I do.
Because we would love to hear that. I know they're short pieces, so they'd be perfect for our podcast.
Absolutely. So do you want me to give any background or just go into it?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. So this first piece is entitled Overlooking Mount Bromo. And Mount Bromo is a volcano in eastern Indonesia that I had the blessing to visit last year. I traveled, got to do some international travel before the shutdown in India and Indonesia. And truly like weeks after I got back, we had our first shutdown order. So I just come back from literally circumnavigation and, getting, all across the world. And then I was stuck at home. So I took a lot of time and just journaled everything that I could possibly remember, like what the ceiling looked like how people like ate their hamburger. Like I wrote down every little nonsensical detail I could remember. But then I also tried to capture these really big experiences I had. So one night in Indonesia, I went with my friend Dwika, who I was visiting, and we got up at midnight and started this trek to climb up a mountain to watch the sunrise over a volcano. So it was a really like godlike, holy, like I am only going to be able to do this once in my lifetime experience. So I, was in this amazing natural world, but I was also, thinking about culture a lot. And it was my first time in a Muslim nation and having, being witness to the calls to prayer that came, all day, 5-6 times a day, and how, whether we were at the top of a mountain or at an amusement park or wherever we were, like everybody went to go pray, and how amazing that was to me. So Overlooking Mount Bromo tries to capture a little bit of that morning. 2:57 a.m. Promptly after tumbling out the rear hatch of the mountaineering jeep, she rushed to the mushala at the far end of the lookout station. I balled up my arms inside my coat and turned towards the inky volcano as she untied her shoes to wash her feet. Fucking freezing. Do you think our gods know each other? I asked after her prayer, head on her shoulder as we cuddled chunky powdered hot chocolates. Hazy cinnamon sun pawed at the distant crater, breathless. She smiled her cheeky response as she opened Visco and pointed her phone towards the light. Nice. That is Overlooking Mount. Thank you.
What would you call this? Not that it matters really, but would you call it a flash nonfiction or?
I think I'd say flash. So this actually came out. Dr. C was posting in our Widener Writers group, like if we could all contribute 100-word pieces, or if anybody had a 100-word piece to share, to just do that. So I don't actually know what the word count on this is, but I tried to do that. And I found the 100-word prompt to be a really interesting sort of.
I've got to try that myself.
Yeah.
I did that interview with him for the second episode on Flash Fiction.
Yeah,
about
I love
travels,
that.
and he got me really turned on to it, but I haven't sat down to bang some out. But I like that a lot.
Yeah, and that one is exactly 100 words. And I actually remember working on it because I got to a great spot and I wanted to end it. And I was like at 97 words. And then I added some and I was at like 102. And then I wanted to get it to 100. And it takes a lot of like very deliberate figuring with your prepositions to get it at exactly 100 words. So that's a really fun challenge and it's very doable. I mean, just 100 words is not a lot. And you often find that you want to write way more after that. So that's, I'd say it's a Flash nonfiction piece.
I like it.
Thank you. And then the second one is entitled Voladores. And I will probably butcher this, but it combines the visual of the Danza de los Voladores, the Dance of the Flyers ceremony, with a part of a conversation I had with a friend. So this ceremony is part of a Mesoamerican tradition. And you just have to just Google Dance of the Flyers and you will see what it is. But it's these people like climb to the top of a pole and they invoke a god, and then they fall off and they're like winding around the pole attached to a rope. It's amazing. I'm not doing it any justice. But I was talking to my wonderful friend Carlos, who's from Mexico, and he was talking about how we translate ourselves across languages and cultures, in romantic relationships. But, it's crazy to think about the translation that we have to do, not only in our language, but in our cultural practices. And how do you translate a personality is really what I was thinking about. So, and even within our own cultures, I feel like we struggle with that. So this one is Voladores. I think she only loves the me I've translated into English, he cried down before leaning back and, belly up, falling bone by bone from the top of the pole. Held more by faith than the ancient rope around his waist, I watched him revolve counterclockwise as an illusory sun, 8 minutes delayed in distance. Halfway down, he wound feathered arms around his body and flung them out, making his own orbit of maple seed motion. Upon reaching the ground, he flipped his legs beneath him and laughed at me as he made his final turn. But we're all translations anyway. And that's Voladores. I want to see if this one's 100 words as well. Yeah, it's exactly 100 words as well. So I was really into this sort of practice of trying to consolidate these like big themes and ideas and capture them in one place at one time in 100 words.
Did that piece start? I'm just curious how you developed it. Did it start with you wanted to write about that? What's it called? Voladores?
Voladores. Yeah.
Yeah. Or did you want to use it as a metaphor? Were you seeking a metaphor and then found that, or did it start with just wanting to write about that?
That's a good question. I don't even really remember, but I do. When I first saw a video of this ceremony happening, I thought like, I can watch this and appreciate the beauty and the majesty of it, but like there's so much cultural heritage and there's so much symbolism, there's so much tradition behind all this that there's no way that I can fully understand what it means to watch this, to be a part of it. And at the same time, I was probably talking to Carlos a lot in the beginning of the spring. Actually, Victoria and I were heading to AWP in San Antonio. We ran into Carlos at the airport going to some other conference in like Boston, which was really serendipitous. So I was thinking about him a lot and his wisdom and all that he shared there. So I don't even remember, but I think the image kind of triggered in me all these other thoughts about what it meant to be able to look as someone outside the culture, and think about how impossible it is to translate these things. But I mean, the translation that you and I are having right now between the two of us in the same culture, like there's the gap, between the self and communicating the self with the other that I'm always thinking about, and I think everybody in the English department is.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So, speaking of translation, can you translate for us what it feels like to get that first publication? Like, I'm just curious. I sort of know what it felt like for me, but what is it? How can you describe that feeling?
Yeah, it feels like, this is quite a question. It makes me feel real in a way that I didn't even know or expect, that seeing my work printed out on a paper, bound in a book with other people would. I feel like a part of, another community, all the people in this inaugural issue, and I've read a lot of other pieces, and they're fantastic. It's made me feel validated. It's made me feel excited, and like it's a high. Like I want to keep doing it. And I've seen a lot of my friends in publishing have set these goals of like 100 rejections during a year, which I think is an awesome goal to set. You like submit so much that you get rejected all the time, but then probably, a few acceptances in there as well. This was the first thing I'd ever submitted on Submittable, and it was accepted. So
oh my goodness.
It blew my mind.
I'm jealous.
A little bit.
You don't want to see my Submittable. It's,
oh my God.
It's a lot of red.
I get to the place where I have so many rejections because and I always thought that it didn't matter if I would ever be published. Like I write for me, and that's still true. But to have a publication, even in the tiniest journal or zine, or in something nobody's ever going to read, it's a marker. It shows where I am in my life and my career right now. It's a wonderful spot to stop and mark the time and say, I did this thing, and somebody else can see it.
Yes, right. It's an artifact that's in the world.
Yeah.
It's real.
Mm-hmm.
That's wonderful. Congratulations. I'm just so thrilled for you. The first of many, I'm sure.
Thank you. Cheers to that. I do hope so.
Are you sending stuff out now, or do you have the bug, or you sort of?
Yeah. So I've been through a little downtime over the holiday season, but I'm trying to look back, sort through my Google Drive right now, and find the pieces that are worth kind of going back to and polishing up and submitting out there. So I'm getting ready to do another sort of big batch submit, and I'm looking for new journals to submit to. And I'm trying to get a ton of rejections. So that's that's the goal for this year. Fill that Submittable with some no's.
Well, that's awesome. Emma, thanks so much. This is a great conversation, and come back when you get some more publications, and we'll share them.
Absolutely. I hope to be back before then. Thank you for letting me come and read. It was wonderful.
Thanks.
Emma Irving's new work can be found in the inaugural issue of Millennial Pulp Literary Magazine. For more information, check out millennialpulp.com. The English Suite is produced by Jim Esch with assistance from Sienna Bowers, Chloe DeFlumery, Christina Giska, Matt Lomas, Gabby Naras, and Shapresa Imarai. If you've enjoyed the podcast, please consider subscribing and sharing with your friends and followers. To send feedback or get more information about Widener English and creative writing, email us at widenerenglishsuite@gmail.com. Thanks for listening.